Welcome to The Learning Core, a podcast by Telos on the Telos channel. Together, we'll interrogate the core issues of conflict with experts from around the world and uncover the path forward toward creative action in our communities. My name is Sarah Sturm, and I'm your host. Today, we're continuing our series of conversations about nonviolence. At Telos, we believe that active nonviolence promotes freedom and justice and is grounded in a spirit of love and hope. Creative and clear resistance against all forms of violence, direct, structural, and cultural, heals our world and paves the path to reconciliation. Just peacemaking is a courageous, countercultural, and purpose-driven way of life. For this conversation, I'm joined by Rana Salman and Eszter Koranyi, the Palestinian and Israeli executive directors from the organization Combatants for Peace, as we explore how nonviolence allows us to imagine and build communities that in practice model the world we are striving for. Born in Jerusalem, Rana Salman descends from a refugee family displaced from Haifa in 1948. She currently serves as the Palestinian Executive Director of Combatants for Peace, a grassroots movement of Palestinians and Israelis working together to end the occupation and all forms of oppression through nonviolent means. Previously, Rana co-founded and led project management at Piece by Piece Tours, where she dedicated the past decade to guiding international groups on educational and political tours across Israel and Palestine. Eszter Koranyi was born and raised in Hungary and has lived in Jerusalem since 2015. Eszter has a BA in Economics and an MA in International Relations from Corvinus University of Budapest and has been involved with nonprofit organizations since 2003. She's been employed by Combatants for Peace since 2017, taking over the role of Israeli CEO since February of 2024. Eszter's an experienced project manager with a specialism in designing and implementing large-scale, non-formal educational programs. She's also an experienced trainer and youth educator and is a leading figure in Israeli-Palestinian cross-border youth peace initiatives. Welcome, Rana and Eszter. We are so honored and excited to have you joining us today on the Learning Core podcast. I'd like to start by inviting you both to share a little bit about your backgrounds and why they're important to understanding your personal desires to center nonviolence and work with Combatants for Peace. Why are you both here? Rana, let's start with you.
Thank you, Sarah, for having us today. It's a great honor. Actually, I come from Bethlehem. I live in Bethlehem in the West Bank. I was born in Jerusalem, but I have lived and grown up under Israeli military occupation. So living and experiencing the conflict, it leads you to different paths. And for me, I chose the path of nonviolence because it actually aligns with my values. And I believe that being committed to nonviolence, even in the face of violence, it would lead us to achieving a lasting peace that will be created upon the foundation of dialogue, understanding, and compassion. For me, it's about being part of a different community that is dedicated to changing the political situation that we have been experiencing for over 75 years now. And Combatants for Peace, it's actually an alternative community. It's a binational community. It's creating a new culture, one that recognizes equally both sides of the conflict and emphasizes on respect and mutual understanding and compassion. So it's also a model. Being part of Combatants for Peace, we're embodying actually the present, the future that we want to bring about, and that actually inspires me and gives me hope.
Rana, that's powerful. And it's reminding me of the idea that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. elevates of beloved community, which is that we're building the world we want to see, even as we're trying to do the work to transform it. And we model that in the communities we are building to get there. So I think that really resonates with me, exactly what you just said around it's not just about the world we want to see, but showing that other kind of community and world is possible in how we advocate for it. Eszter, what about for you? Why are you at Combatants for Peace?
Yeah, so I'm from Hungary originally. I was born and grew up in Budapest in a Jewish family, and I came to Israel 11 years ago, not for the first time, but for the first time to stay for longer. And then I lived in a kibbutz, in an intentional community in the south of the country, very close to Eilat, for whom it means something. And I really liked all the connections that the community created also among people. It's something very unique. And I've been to all sorts of communities in Hungary, but I haven't seen such like strong ties, and also strong ties to the Jewish culture, to the Jewish holidays, and still like very open, trying to like give another meaning, like this tikkun olam, to make the world a better place. But then I also understood that they have some kind of limits when it comes to the conflict. And then after 3 years, I decided to discover like a bit more what this country is about, and also I was there when at the last big Gaza war in 2014. So it was also another push to see that something is very, very complicated and different than the story I was told when I was in Hungary, and also when I was in this community. So I decided that I do a 1 year in Jerusalem, and then I will see. And then I met my partner, and he's Israeli, born and raised. So it was very clear for him that he's staying. So when we got married, and now we have 2 kids also, it was clear that we are staying in Jerusalem. And in that 1 year I wanted to like just explore as much as I could, and that's where I met Combatants for Peace, because I really liked how the values are translated to action, and also the combination of nonviolence and binational action, co-resistance to the occupation. I felt that I really don't want to accept that I have a privilege to come here and live here and become a citizen, and people that are born in the land and live here for generations don't. So it doesn't mean for me that I can't stay here, but I decided that if I'm staying, then I want to work in some ways to make a different reality here, the reality of equal rights and equal possibilities for everyone who is living on the land. And I think because Combatants for Peace is a very authentic and very inspiring community of people, I just found it as a good place to pursue this.
I think that language you used around co-resistance is so impactful and important, and it goes beyond just that idea of coexistence. And I think to me that ties into this idea of what nonviolence is and isn't. At Telos, we understand nonviolence to be creative and clear resistance to injustice, something that's active and not passive. It's not just kumbaya, it's not just getting along. It's that creative and clear action to transform unjust structures into just peace. And I think that co-resistance is such an important part of that. Eszter, I'll start with you this time. What does nonviolence mean or look like for Combatants for Peace? It's a word that's thrown around a lot. Sometimes I agree with its usage. Sometimes I think that it does get towards just coexistence, not co-resistance. But what is or isn't nonviolence for Combatants for Peace?
Okay, so nonviolence in general, it's all the tools that we can use to express that we don't agree with the reality that we live in. That's what we say, as long as we don't hurt anyone. So when it comes to demonstrations, both within Israel or in Palestine, we always try to de-escalate, not have clear tasks of who is doing what, who is entitled to talk to the forces of the occupation, whether it's army or police, or within Israel, it's usually the police. And yeah, it's not about occupation, but it's still about limiting the rights of people to express themselves when they criticize what the government does. So that's one thing. Also, when we do protective presence of communities in areas C that are endangered, we always try to really protect the communities and not to trigger the army, because we believe that, or army or the settlers, because we believe that this is something that helps also for the communities to stay there and not just to go for some open conflict just to show that they are bad people. We know that they are bad. I mean, maybe they are also not bad people, but what they are doing, it's bad. So basically, this is it. And we also do a lot of training on nonviolent communication and on how to do like this de-escalation. And obviously, it comes with a lot of training and meetings, which, it's a thin line between co-resistance and coexistence. And obviously, both have an important thing. And we do a lot of this because, like, the community of activists, they also need to meet in calm situations and exchange their experience and meet with each other. So that's like a support base for the field activities.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into just forming those relationships across lines of difference that helps fuel the transformation, both for individuals, but then also for the societies or the structures around them. And I think that is an important part of nonviolence, is creating the space for a different type of encounter between people who otherwise are intentionally kept pretty separate. Rana, I'd love to invite you to build on what Eszter just shared. What does nonviolence mean in your perspective for Combatants for Peace? And are there any other programs or processes you all use to lead to that kind of transformation?
Yeah, I think at Combatants for Peace, nonviolence is both a principle and a practice. And just to share a little bit about the history of the movement, because our activists, our founders, were actually former combatants, and they decided to lay down their weapons and to join their forces to end the occupation and all forms of oppression and work towards peace. And they have gone through this personal transformation, and it's one of the core elements of the movement's approach. Storytelling actually is very important in our approach, because it also helps to humanize the other. And many of our programs include that sort of approach. And it's rooted also in the belief that all lives are sacred. And we have seen during the last 10 months and of the ongoing war and all the innocent lives that are lost. And for us as a community, we try to promote empathy and humanize the other and understanding for the other's pain and grieving also together and sharing the sorrow and the pain of the other. For practice, we, as Eszter mentioned, we do so much of nonviolent resistance, co-resistance, which includes the nonviolent protests, demonstrations, solidarity actions, the protective presence for shepherds in Area C. We also do a lot of educational initiatives, seminars and workshops, outreach programs, trying to also get this principle and practice to our communities, especially about nonviolence. And we also do advocacy work because also on a political level, we believe that change comes from the bottom up, but we have recently seen that it's not enough. And we also need to work on the political level, because we have witnessed poor performance from our governments, and it's leading us to more death and destruction. So we felt that it was a responsibility for the civil society, organizations, and nonviolent movements to step up and raise the voice of the people to demand an end to the war and to go towards a political solution. And we do that also through building alliances and partnerships with other organizations who also believe in the same way that we do. And it helps us to amplify our voice and our efforts, because we're all working to create a broader impact and changing the reality that we all live here.
I want to think a little bit about the cost of nonviolence. In addition to the cost of violence, Rana, you described the grief, the collective mourning that has happened since October 7th and what's happened since. But even before, right, everyone who lives in Israel, Palestine knows the cost of violence. Former combatants, whether they be Israeli or Palestinian, know the cost of violence. But I think naming the cost of nonviolence is also really important in helping people understand that it's, again, not passive, it's active, that it comes with its own costs, that it is a way of life for courageous people. I'm wondering if both of you can share a little bit about the challenges for members of Combatants for Peace in their home communities and what some of the costs they pay in committing to nonviolence are, that help illustrate why this really is a very brave, creative, countercultural way of engaging for transformation. And Rana, let's start with you this time.
As you mentioned, like we're actually choosing a different path, which is the unpopular path, and especially because we do it jointly as a joint community of Palestinians and Israelis, and still there is this is still not very common in the region that we live at, because we are still going through an ongoing conflict for many years. So there is also this mistrust from our own communities from what we do. For Palestinians, maybe I would be accused of normalization because I'm working with Israelis. And for Israelis, they might be also accused of being traitors because they are working with the enemy as well. So it's always these negative stereotypes about the other, because we grew up with a big gap between the two communities and with many negative stereotypes about the other. Because there has been so much division and separation between the two communities through the media, through the actual facts on the ground, with the separation wall, and you grow up with this kind of, let's say, fear from the other. That's actually our problem. We don't know each other. That's why in our work we feel that personal stories are very important to get to know the other and have that sort of dialogue in order to transform it into nonviolent action. And so there has also been so many challenges, especially after October 7th, for us as a movement to work together because of the lack of spaces that can host us as a joint community. People are still afraid to hold spaces for us, and we can only meet, for example, in Area C. That's the only place that is possible, and the places are limited. So that actually affected our work in the beginning, that we had to meet online, and then our office became kind of like a hub for all of our programs, and not just for us, for all other organizations, because we had the feeling that there is a big need for us to be together in this difficult time and to share together our fears and our feelings. And many challenges, including the current situation of what we are facing, the ongoing war, and what it. Many people were affected personally. Many people have lost friends or family. We have activists originally from Gaza who have lost family members, and the devastation and the grief and the pain, it's still here. It's not like we're post-trauma. It's still ongoing. So creating that space for everybody to, a safe space for everyone to share and to be together in this difficult time, and to go through it together and stay committed to our values and our principles.
That idea of not being post-trauma, I think, is really resonant, right? How do you transform after conflict or after violence if the violence is continued, sustained, and experienced every single day? I think that is a challenge that I'm glad you named, that is so present right now and has been for years. And yeah, I don't know what to do with that, right? But it makes it so much harder when the violence and the trauma are ongoing. Eszter, I'd love to hear your thoughts, too, on the cost of what nonviolence looks like for you or for your community, and for anyone else that you would like to bring in.
Yeah, I think it's what Rana mentioned. Maybe I would add in the light of 7th of October and the war in Gaza that has been going on since then, that we also experience this kind of like separation in the international community. Like in the beginning, we had a lot of interest from the international community. We still do. And then we started to hear voices of questioning what we are doing, like from both sides, like also from the side of BDS and also from the side of Jewish communities abroad, saying that we are like not protecting enough the Jewish community in Israel, and that this is like all just an answer to the violence of the Palestinians. On the other hand, the same from Palestinian communities or people very much identifying with them, saying that we are doing too much and the Jews are just the aggressors and they should go away from here. And then we are, somehow stuck in the middle, because like we who live in the land, we know that we will both stay, and we believe that the only path that is possible and it will allow us to stay how much it is possible to in a world that it's like beyond the conflict and beyond the trauma is when we choose the path of nonviolence. So besides like holding ourselves and our communities and our binational work, we also find that we also like somehow need to support those who are abroad, still identify with the values of nonviolence and the idea of binational peace work. And somehow we find ourselves a lot of times in situations when we tell about our stories, and then people from abroad say like, wow, you support me so much, because this is like, I struggle to find partners even abroad for this. So it's also another prize, because like we have a hard enough work just to contain ourselves, and then a lot of times we are the ones actually supporting people who are supposed to support us to be able to continue.
That's a really important point, that it's the double emotional labor of figuring out how to exist in this context in a way that is constructive and nonviolent, and then also having to invite other people into that work, especially people who you need the support of. That's resonant. And I think that's, I'll just name as an employee at Telos, right? That kind of challenge of feeling like you're getting pushback from both sides. To me, that doesn't take away the fact that that's incredibly challenging, but I think it's also encouraging, right? That we all together are trying to create spaces that do lead to what we will call mutual flourishing, freedom, dignity, security for Israelis and Palestinians in equal measure, not at the cost of one another. And that those spaces do challenge people from all sides, right? But I think that's part of what makes them so invitational. It recognizes that everyone has work they need to do to find a way to be a part of those communities. And that work comes from that co-resistance or that commitment to a future of flourishing for everyone. I would love to invite you both to share a story of growth, right? I know that there are so many that come out of Combatants for Peace, but one of the things that I think is hard in these moments is to hold on to that belief that change is always possible, both for individuals and for systems, in a time where it feels like we are going so quickly in the wrong direction, where we're seeing more people, right, criticize us from those different sides. Those stories of growth where this work actually is possible, where we see people transform, I think are so incredibly needed to casting the imagination for what this work can look like for other people and to invite them into it. So I'm wondering if there's one or two stories of growth where you've seen people transform that you would be comfortable sharing with us today.
I have something. It's not like one person, but I would like to tell about a program that is new. So we have a leadership program for youth already running on the Israeli side for 4.5 years, and for 2.5 years for Palestinian youth. It's a uninational program where we take a group of young people, something between 12 and 20 young people, that go through a leadership program where they get to know the narrative of the other, and also tools of nonviolent resistance, with the idea that they will become the future leaders and the current activists of the peace field from both sides. And just as we are speaking, a very special cohort is about to finish the first pilot version of a cohort where religious Jewish people participate in this leadership program. And some of them are coming from like very much the heart of the Zionist right-wing Jewish education and families, which is like, all like these are the people who vote for Ben Gvir and for Smotrich, and then their kids, like the young generation, they have, I think, 13 participants. There are like people among that group who grew up with a very, very different narrative of what we bring as combatants for peace, and they choose to not only just to hear it in one conversation, but really engage in a program of 3 weeks where they meet Palestinians. They spend a day and a half in South Hebron Hills. They are now in Yerucham, in the south of Israel, meeting also Bedouin communities from the unrecognized villages in the Negev, and they went to Nazareth, and they did tours in East Jerusalem and in everywhere in the West Bank, and they met activists. And we are very, very excited what will come out of all this. Also, I think I find it very special, like we are not in the business of religious education from any religion, but because this program is also initiated by someone who grew up in this religious Zionist Jewish circles, he found it also very important to deconstruct the idea that the Jewish religion is only for what it's used mostly recently, like for explaining why Jewish people have the ownership on the land and why others don't, and all the rest. So they are doing also like a special Jewish learning in the mornings, which I participated in one of them, bringing texts from unknown Jewish thinkers and rabbis, and trying to discover the part in the Jewish religion which is unfortunately becoming very, very niche in Israel, of the tikkun olam, of making the world a better place for everyone. Because these values are there just in every religion, they are also there in the Jewish religion. And I find it very special because we don't want to get like disconnected from our tradition, and we want to find relevant ways to connect with while keeping our values.
I love that idea of finding things that are already held within a community that might be sacred texts or just stories and practices and values, and using those to help transform and invite people into a future of mutual flourishing. That, to me, is such an important part of creating an imagination of what this can look like that's still very much rooted in who people are and what they value, but that does challenge, right, other interpretations of those same texts or beliefs. So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Rana, any stories that you'd like to highlight for us?
For stories of growth, I just would like to mention about one special event that we organize annually. It's the Israeli-Palestinian Memorial Day ceremony, and it usually occurs on the Memorial Day, Israeli Memorial Day. But at Combatants for Peace, we do it in an alternative way. We come as Palestinians and Israelis to mourn together the falling victims of the conflict from both sides. And as we mentioned, this is kind of, it offers an alternative to the violence and dehumanization of the other by encouraging mourning over all the victims to the conflict from both sides. And this event has actually started back in 2006 with a small audience. And today it has grown to thousands of people attending in person. Last year, we were about 15,000 people in a public park in Tel Aviv, with the also live broadcast where 300,000 people watching us live. And also this year as well, we couldn't hold it in person because of the political situation, but we did a live screening of the event, and we had over also 300,000 people watching us live and joining us in this ceremony as we grieve together and stand strong in demanding an end to the occupation and the ongoing violence. And it's a great ceremony that shifts actually the narrative of pain and victimhood and hopelessness towards bringing Israelis and Palestinians together to mourn side by side and model another way forward. And the way it has grown over it has been we have been holding this for the last 19 years, and a number of people who have been taking part and joining, whether locally in Palestine and Israel and internationally, have grown tremendously, and that actually very inspiring and gives us also hope that our communities are open to changing the reality here and choosing a different path forward.
One of my colleagues, David, talks about hope as requiring three things: lament, imagination, and action. And I think that this whole conversation, but especially the joint memorial ceremony, to me really show what that looks like in an embodied way. It's collectively lamenting the violence that has been enacted upon one another and the structural violence that needs to be transformed. It's the imagination that's present in organizations like Combatants for Peace that show that a different future is possible because it's already possible within the communities being created. And then it is that action, right? Whether it's the joint Memorial Day ceremony, the direct solidarity work protecting, shepherds, or any of the other programs you've highlighted, that those three things are the embodiment of hope as action, not just as emotion. And I don't want to ask you what gives you hope in terms of an emotional sense, because to me that isn't always helpful. But I do want to ask, in part because as we invite listeners into this work, it is hard, it is long, it is ongoing, right? The work, the transformation we want to see probably will not happen fully in our lifetimes. What sustains you in this work? Where do you find your source of sustenance that lets you continue on the days where it's incredibly hard and you might want to throw up your hands, but you can't? What sustains you?
So I think a couple of things. First of all, we are really just an amazing bunch of people. Like, luckily, we have a very good community. Just Rana is laughing. But it's true. Like, I think, like in every workplace, especially because for us, it's our work, it's like our daily job. So it's not like for the activists that they, choose to come whenever they want or they can. We have to do this work every day. And I think like just in any other workplace, to have colleagues that we like each other and appreciate each other, and we have good connections, and when one is down, the other is in a better position, and we can just give a hug to each other or just laugh or cry together. That's super important. And it's also like always there is this other layer that, hey, like we are also Israelis and Palestinians. We come from 3 religions, and some maybe doesn't even have one. And we're born in a lot of different places, and all this doesn't matter. We are in different ages, men, women together. And if we can make it, then it's possible. So that also gives the hope that, okay, we are embodying something that we work for. And then for me personally, I also, I take a lot of strength from the stories of especially my 2 grandmothers that I was lucky enough to hear when I was younger, and their stories of the Holocaust and how they lived it through, and how they didn't give up and had hope. And even a lot of, they both told me a lot of stories of humanity after, also during and after, and they were both in the helping business. Like one of them was a children's doctor and the other one was a psychologist, and they both stayed in Hungary and could, treat the kids of people who were they wanted to kill them 10 years before that, and they could still do it. So they had this huge inner strength to see the good in people. So it's something that I just got from them. And also from my parents' generation, because they were fighting to end communism. Like my father was especially, he was a bit part of these secret groups to end communism in Hungary, and it did end. So we know that everything ends. I have this childhood memory that my father was in Berlin and he took a piece of the wall and he was like, wow, we didn't think that it's gonna happen. And like, I was 5 years old, so I couldn't grasp it fully. But still, like, he was so happy holding this piece of stone in his hand and saying like, wow, this is a symbol I was like wishing for and fighting for, also with nonviolent means, obviously, through my young adult years, and now it's here. So it's gonna happen.
Exactly. Change is always possible, and it will change if we bring about that change. Thanks, Eszter. Rana, what about for you? What sustains you in this work?
Actually, once we were talking about it, that one of the things why I laughed, because we said that peace work is not fun. Sometimes, like, because you are working so hard to change a reality that is sometimes so out of your control, and sometimes you get burned out because you're always in this field and trying to make a change. So I have so much respect for all of our activists and who are always on the ground and escorting the shepherds and in protest and daily and everywhere, facing so much violence and challenges, and still continue to be committed to creating a different new reality on this land. That actually gives me hope that we are still surviving together as a joint community, no matter what the challenges are, no matter what is going outside around us, that everything is actually encouraging us to be separated or to divide us, but still we continue to build these bridges and close this gap and bring our communities together. And that actually gives me hope for a better future, because if we can do it on this smaller scale, then it's possible on a larger scale. And I'm always inspired by different grassroots movements and how they were able to transform their realities, whether it was by the independence movement by Gandhi, or the American civil rights movement, or the struggle in South Africa. So for our conflict, it's possible. I know that change is possible, and we're actually working together, co-resisting the occupation, all forms of oppression, so that we bring a new reality, a peaceful reality for everyone who lives here, from the river to the sea, to live in dignity, in justice, in equality, in liberty, everyone.
That is exactly the work that I want to invite our listeners and the Telos Network into. It's harnessing, as listeners, your own agency and responsibility to work in your communities for change, to bring about the kind of just peace that enables the mutual flourishing of Israelis and Palestinians. And Eszter and Rana, I'd love to land in that space. At Telos, we've been calling our listeners to demand a ceasefire, to demand the return of hostages, to end the occupation, to transform systems of violence into systems of just peace. And I'd love to end by inviting you both to give our listeners a charge or call to action as well. Most of the folks that I have the pleasure of working with come from an American context. They're usually not Israeli or Palestinian, but they care deeply about what happens in the Holy Land and want to be aware of the ways that the U.S. has sustained and enabled conflict, so that at home here we can continue to work to transform our own complicity into something that sustains and enables mutual flourishing. So as we wrap up our time together, what's the invitation you would like to leave listeners with based on your work and what you know needs to transform?
My invitation to them is that not to choose sides, but to choose the side of humanity and justice and equal rights for all. Because actually choosing a side, it actually dehumanizes the other, and it's not helpful for a Palestinian or an Israeli living on this land. And for Americans, I know they have the power to make a change, to put pressure on their government to actually intervene in our conflict and push forward for negotiations. And especially right now, what is immediately needed is a ceasefire and a hostage prisoner deal to end the ongoing war and address this humanitarian crisis that is happening in Gaza right now. And we know that even if the war ends tomorrow, there is still so much work needs to be done. And that will be also on the shoulders of civil society organizations to cover all that vacuum and everything that has been happening and to rebuild it, to rebuild also trust and hope for a better future. For us, we would like to ask them to amplify our voices as a joint movement of Palestinians and Israelis calling for an end to the violence, to the end to the war, and to also organize solidarity actions in their own communities, whether it is by sending letters to their Congress members, putting pressure on their government, also bringing our activist voices to their congregations or to their communities to hear different stories, because we know these kind of stories and are not so much highlighted in media or in the news. And we'd like to actually share a different story and let people actually choose this path that we are committed to.
Yeah, I would just add one little thought, because this is indeed choosing the side of humanity and sharing this with us and sending us strength. That's the most important, with all the means that Rana mentioned. And as we said, like, our most used tool and how the movement started is the personal stories of transformation, from being in the cycle of violence to become co-resistors with the tools of nonviolence. So it's also a possibility to invite us to hear these transformational stories by one of our founders or activists. If one of the listeners thinks that this can be of a transformational change also in their communities when they experience a lot of like unclarity or of another possibility, or maybe like questioning the possibility of choosing a path that is binational, that it's joined and it's non-violent, because I can imagine her based on the stories that we hear, that for a lot of people they face so much questioning, even if they believe in the way that we offer, a lot of people from their communities don't. So if it's something that can be of support, then this is something we can also offer from far away, and we will be happy to have like a huge base of supporters abroad doing all what Rana mentioned. And we recognize that it sometimes starts with hearing an inspirational story of transformation.
Rana and Eszter, thank you so much for those calls to action. For everyone who's been listening, if you have an opportunity to bring Combatants for Peace to your community, every time I've had an opportunity to hear their participants speak, and I hope you got a sense from this conversation today, it's such an impactful, empowering group of wonderful activists who are really living out what it means to be nonviolent activists, but also I'll use the language of just peacemakers. And I hope that if anything you heard today inspires you or makes you think that's something I want to be a part of, that you use it as an invitation to harness your agency and to do this work alongside as we co-resist in the ways that we can to bring about that future of mutual flourishing. So Rana and Eszter, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your willingness to spend time with us today, sharing about the violence, but then also the opportunity and the transformative work you're doing. Super grateful for everything you shared, and to our listeners, see you next time.